First of all, let me say that we've been hearing for years about closing the quote-unquote gun show loophole. There's no such thing. All the laws relating to dealer sales are the same in gun shows, out of gun shows. All the laws relating to private sales are the same in and out of gun shows. So for all these years, I've been telling people this is not about the gun show loophole. This is about restricting all private transactions, as happened in California. And lo and behold, here we are with 1588 that leapfrogs the so-called gun show loophole and going straight to regulation of all private transactions. So I thank the sponsors for making an honest man out of me. What this really is all about is not really regulating private transactions, as in California. It's about creating a registration database. And registration is not specifically mentioned in the bill, but it's there. And I'll try to get to that, probably not in 2 minutes, but hopefully there'll be some questions so I can expand. Let me also point out that years ago there were discussions on gun show background checks, and the discussions broke down because the proponents of closing the gun show loophole insisted on a paper trail. This is about registration. This bill is unworkable. There's huge problems. There's unintended consequences. I'm not going to go into details because I don't have time in 2 minutes. But whoever wrote this bill doesn't understand federal law. They don't understand federal regulations. They don't understand how this proposal would dovetail with the federal law and federal regs, and in fact with the current existing state law. This bill is going to be ineffective. 99% of gun owners are law-abiding citizens. They are going to be the only ones that are going through this process. It's going to be a huge regulatory scheme. It's going to disproportionately impact law-abiding citizens. The $20 tax is unfair. For one thing, it's questionable whether dealers will be able to even do this for $20. And the answer to the previous question is, yes, this can be done voluntarily. It is being done voluntarily right now. Dealers charge anywhere from $30 to $60. It's very likely they won't do this for $20, and it could have the impact of shutting down private transactions. So it's unfair. It's unenforceable. Maybe I'll get to that. We need to enforce existing laws. That's the key. This is a misdirected program. It's not going to work, and I make myself available for
Representative
questions.
Rodney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Brian, could you explain how does this bill create basically a registration database throughout the state?
Well, basically, what happens is, and let me say that this bill says in the statute that you can go either to a dealer or to a law enforcement agency. You can't go to a law enforcement agency, and that's one of the things that doesn't work. And it's been alluded to by Representative Hope, by Mr. Pierce from Waspic. But law enforcement can't do, under the federal law, they can't do background checks on people. The only time they can do checks is if there's a permit application for like a CPL, or if a dealer initiates the check. If a dealer initiates the paperwork, then for handgun sales in Washington, those have to be run through local law enforcement. So in that case, as a point of contact, the local law enforcement agency can do a NICS check as part of their more comprehensive check. So with respect to handgun sales in the state of Washington right now, like I said, it goes through law enforcement. There's a triplicate form that has to be completed by the dealer, and that form goes to local law enforcement, and it also goes to the Department of Licensing. There's a registration database maintained in the state of Washington. Under this bill, the only way it could happen would be a seller and a buyer would have to go to a dealer. The dealer is required by law to take that firearm from the seller into his inventory. So if I'm the seller and Representative Rodney, you're the buyer, we go into a dealer. I basically relinquish my possession of that firearm to the dealer. He now has to log it into his inventory. Now once he has that firearm in his inventory, for long guns under existing law, he does a NICS check. And if you, the buyer, pass the NICS check, then he can deliver it to you. On a handgun transaction, it would be the same thing. I take my handgun, the dealer takes it from me, he logs it into his inventory, and now under state law, well, under state law, there's the whole state process. So he's going to go through local law enforcement. The local law enforcement agency is going to do the NICS check, but they're also going to do the whole state process. They have to, because the dealer now has this handgun in his dealer's inventory. He's got to comply with the law. So now there's a 5-day waiting period under state law on that handgun transfer to you, and there's registration. Now, I guess the substitute that, you know, it's likely that that whole process would have, under the existing or the originally introduced bill, it also would have applied to long gun sales. Perhaps in the substitute that's addressed. But clearly this is going to encompass handgun registration of all those private handgun sales. And let me also say that right now I've called a bunch of dealers, and yes, it can be done voluntarily, as Representative Clippard asked, but dealers are charging anywhere from $30. That's the cheapest I found, and that's a gun shop that does it for $30 for their special members of their shooting range. But that dealer also charges $60 for members of the general public who are not members of their club. Other dealers, I called a couple here in the Olympia area, they charge, one charges
Judy,
40, one charges 50.
Thank you for all the good. We really do need to move along. We have a lot of folks that are signed to testify. Representative Shea, very briefly, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There's some contradictory testimony that we've heard previous to you coming up here, and it seems it needs to be clarified. We've heard that law enforcement right now cannot or has policies that they do not do these background checks, and yet under this bill it seems to say that they would be able to, but as I read federal law they wouldn't be able to, so this would fall solely to dealers. And if it does, then would you foresee dealers just not doing these things at all because they can't afford to do so?
Yeah, well, like I said, yes, law enforcement, they are prohibited under federal law and regulation from doing these. So yes, they will all have to be initiated through a licensed dealer. And yes, like I said, dealers are charging anywhere from 30 to 60. So if they now are mandated by government that they can not charge more than 20, then they're going to say, I'm not going to lose money. I'm not going to spend the time it takes to do these checks for $20 when it costs me really anywhere from 30 to 50 in time.
Representative
so
Kirby
yes,
has a
it could
question as
shut
well.
down private sales.